Good morning, Christopher. Many thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Happy to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too, and great to have you with us to share your thoughts and, I guess your experiences over the past 18 months and maybe what you're thinking about as we move forward. We're going to be talking through just some ideas, some of the trends that you're seeing, but focusing specifically on this idea of a more user-centric approach to IT and how you inculcate that within the organization. I guess a quick question just to get things underway and maybe get a sense of what the past 18 months has looked like. For you personally, how has your role and the way you work been impacted during the course of the pandemic? What's the biggest difference for you as a CIO compared to 15, 18 months ago?
It's been interesting. The last 18 months have certainly had a lot of impact across retail, which is, the specialty industry I'm in. And with retail, there are still this battle of being in the store, being in the warehouse, and taking care of things. So as a CIO, my job has actually been to help partner with the rest of the organization to make sure that they have the capabilities that they need while pushing forward. But more than that, it's been very interesting. The last 18 months have really transformed the thinking at the tile shop, where it's very much focused, and there's a lot of significant investment to leverage technology to enable a lot of capabilities all the way up to the board level. And COVID is less that focus, and certainly it's more around enabling the business and driving those business capabilities that the organization's been looking to do. And that's been the most refreshing and candidly fun part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Christopher, as you mentioned there, it's a business with lots of physical touch points, whether that be the store, whether that be the back office, the supply chain elements of that. So what's the experience been like in moving towards this more of a virtual world, virtual ways of working, virtual touch points, perhaps more digital channels?
Yeah, so we had just relaunched our website prior to COVID, and we saw that certainly expand significantly as far as use. But what's interesting about Tile is it's extremely heavy. So despite all of our efforts, virtual sales were not nearly as much a driver as making the information as available as possible so customers could make the decisions, see what was going on, and then ultimately they still ended up often in the store. And so our focus was making things safe for our employees first and foremost, but certainly for the customer as well. And so, masking and basic following of the direction from the CDC, making sure things were clean, constantly adjusting staffing. But then our customers were still wanting product, so we had to make sure that we could do pickup at store. And picking up tile at a store is a little different than many things. You got to back up your pickup truck or your SUV or whatever it is, and we're loading it in and trying to make it touch free. So a lot of communication, a lot of just making sure that the customer knew how to get a hold of us and communicate with our sales associates, making sure that the customer still could do what they needed to do and our employees were still safe.
Yeah, thanks, Christopher. I mean, all of these projects, they're not IT projects, they're business projects. They're organizational projects.
IT projects.
Yeah. So, what's kind of been the IT component of that? What have the demands on you as a department and as a leader changed as you've looked to implement those very business focused projects?
Well, in our case, we have a good infrastructure in place using technologies that were previously in place. So we didn't have to do some of the scrambling that many other organizations did. Although we have leveraged it and improved things even more with the rollout of Office 365 from a collaboration standpoint. That's certainly been a huge change for us, increased capabilities in communication, and also making sure that everyone could reach everyone at any time that they needed to, being able to work anywhere that was, needed or people that wanted based on what the pandemic was driving. So that's certainly one of the big things. But a lot of things were about just letting our employees and our customers know that we were there, and it was less about the technology. But I would say that big things that we did put in place were increased security, certainly an increased stability on things that we'd used for a long time, Citrix and our VPN capabilities. Once those were in place, though, the team just was off and running and really focused more on the tactical capabilities that had been perhaps more lacking because of technical debt. A lot of the things that I joined the organization, and I've not been here that long, were just investing in the basics so that we could lay that foundation, thinking about the pandemic as kind of a launch board for growth. And so as we wrap up 2021, we're taking care of those foundational things, upgrades, taking care of things like network capabilities and stabilities and other things like that. You might say, well, that doesn't sound any different than normal, but the mentality was different. They understood why it was important and were able to make the investments so that as we move into 2022, we can go back to growth mode, which is something the Tile Shop has been good at in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked in the panel just then about this idea of not wasting a crisis, and I suppose it's definitely been a case of higher visibility equals an opportunity to push projects through that have maybe been on the back burner or have been stalled for a while.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, some of those things, doing an upgrade is not a popular activity. But when everybody's hunkered down just trying to keep things going, it gave my team the time, the space, in order to take care of something that should have been done, a couple of years ago. Now it's going to complete here in another month. And with that completion is a whole host of new potential capabilities that I've already started talking to my peers about, saying, now that we've done this, we have all of this potential that we can start to unleash. And that's the fun part, as I said.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's maybe dig into this idea of more user-centric. And I guess users has two meanings. It's got the employees, as you've said, on the one hand, but also the customers on the other. So how are you building this approach into everything you do? How are you making that part of your culture, if you like?
Yeah, so first, what I've learned based on my previous experience, especially in retail, but I think it applies everywhere, is an idea of test and learn. And test and learn is something that IT people have been used to, but not necessarily applied in all cases. I'm a big believer in testing and learning and also the concepts of agile. I don't even think of it more of the methodology, but more that mindset of agile. Testing and learning and creating that virtuous cycle, if you will, of, okay, now I've done that, now I can do it better, now I can do it better. And so that's the first part of what we've been focusing on, is a little bit of how we're doing our work, how we think about our work. And then the user centricity in two, as you described, two different ways, employee versus your customer. If you get your employee experience right, then the customer experience is significantly improved. So one of the things that I did as soon as I started at the Tile Shop was started to go to the stores constantly. Where is the employee? Where is the customer? And literally watching them execute. One of the things that I haven't done, which I really would like to do in the coming months, is actually work as an employee. And we've talked about doing that with our employees, putting every employee, not just those in store, but our corporate employees, through 1 or 2 days of learning what it feels like for an employee to sell to a customer and actually having that experience. But already we've put our employees in store, into the distribution centers, and just said, what are they doing? And what we've discovered is it's way too painful. The employee is really working hard to do what they're doing today. And we have to find easier ways for them to do the work that they're already doing. so that they can become candidly less technically savvy and more focused on what they're supposed to do, whether it be sales, whether it be, packing and loading inventory, or whatever the case is. The reality is it's too hard today. And so by experiencing it themselves, then they're able to come back and think about, well, when I was doing, trying to sell to the customer and it took 10 minutes for me to enter an order in, what can I do to cut that in half? Or what can I do to make it so that we don't have to use pen and paper? In a few places in our distribution centers, we're still using pen and paper, heaven forbid. And so each of those questions becomes much more visible when you experience it yourself. The other thing that we've talked about is in retail, we're all consumers already. And so trying to position ourselves to say, what would it be like if I were doing it? And candidly, I was on my own website and I was frustrated as all get out. So the first thing I did was ask the question to our web team, why can't we do, X, Y, and Z? Why don't we have recommendations? Why is it so hard to search? And asking those questions, I'm a huge believer in asking the question, why? And then answering that question helps us answer the next thing that we need to be doing as a technology team, proactively bringing those things to our business partners, saying, if we did this, is that going to drive significant value to you? And the answer sometimes is, no, not really. And other times it's like, why didn't you do that 5 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in that respect, it's less about better educating the workforce, the employees, in order to be able to better use the tools. But actually, it's just about reducing the friction in using some of those tools.
Oh, absolutely. Frictionless is certainly one term that we talk about constantly. And the other one that we talk about, which, some people use omnichannel, I like to use channelless, because I don't believe there are channels anymore. We have so many channels that if you try and talk about channels, it's hard to think about. And so rather than thinking about channels, we ask the question of, where does the customer want to do this transaction? How do they want to do this transaction? When do they want to do it? Do they want to do it when, they're up late at night trying to imagine what it's like to do tile? Or do they always want to be in the store? And we know the answer is they want to do it when they want to do it, where they want to do it, how they want to do it. So we need to be good at all of those channels and integrate those channels, or better yet, just remove the concept of channel in many ways from the experience for the customer. Now, we might have channels internally and we have to think about how to bring those together, but I'm a big believer in both friction reduction or frictionless experience, as well as that concept of how do we just get rid of channel when it's a customer experience.
Yes, a fascinating area, Christopher. You talked earlier on about this idea of moving to a more agile approach, and actually that strikes me as much more of a mindset-based approach as opposed to, it's not necessarily going to do technologically. So how are you driving the culture of change and actually driving changes in the ways you work as an IT department, first of all, but then how that kind of has a knock-on effect across the entire organization?
Well, I do think some of the practices of agile methodology help with that mindset. So we're trying to educate our own team as well as our partners throughout the organization. What does it look like to do iterative development instead of that old style waterfall development? And so it looks like having a list of items that everybody wants to do and prioritizing them. It is testing and learning and showing and having them validate. It's those approaches in agile methodology, but in order for them to be agile themselves, I believe a lot of it is accepting and learning about change. And so we're also working to help them. In some ways, we've been forced on with change with the pandemic, right? We've been forced to do things different than we have in the past. And so just by that significant cataclysmic event in many ways, if you will. It's causing people to realize I might not be able to do things the same way that I used to do them. And that opens a door to allow us to then give those examples and try new things. But I oftentimes do it in much more of a cultural development standpoint, person by person. I'm a big believer that it's not an organization that is going to make change. It's a whole bunch of individuals. And so you have to connect with all of them. And so I'm asking for my team to connect with all of them, which is, again, a new experience for many. I heard earlier the term order taker. Well, that means everybody can sit in the back room and we get the request and we take it and we say, I think that's what they want, versus sitting down with our partners on a regular basis. So we've started to create cadences where you sit down on a regular basis and have a conversation and say, is this working? What's not working? And then we might find that we need to pivot and change. Someone used to describe agile to me this way. You start with a skateboard and somebody's like, well, I want to go from point A to point B. And they're like, and I really want a car, but let's start with a skateboard. And now let's start with a scooter and change that from a skateboard to a scooter. Now I've got an engine, but it's going awful slow. I really want to go faster. And now I've got a motorcycle. And you really realize that as you're going fast, that your motorcycle lets the wind blow in your hair and it's just lovely. So you're all of a sudden saying, I really liked that car, but I want the wind to blow in my hair. And suddenly you realize that instead of a sedan, you're building a convertible, right? So that's the concept of agile, is it's the iterative nature, but it's also the cost structure. I spent money all along the way getting value. I might actually spend more money at each point, right, than I would if I just built a car. But because you've gotten value at every point, it's higher value, and therefore they don't care if that investment over time costs more, because I got value along the way rather than building a car for 2.5 years. So those concepts are the concepts that you teach, and then you put people in front of people to experience it. What is it like? And that they're not tools as in the traditional technology tools. In fact, I've always told people, technology is the easy part. People is the hard part. So if you get the people agile and their mentality and their change, and you ask how that is, that's done giving them confidence, giving them purpose, giving them focus, answering why. And then letting them know, if you do it this way, you're going to get more value, one. And as the IT people, they're going to actually feel more valuable because they see the improvements along the way and they get confidence along the way. So it's about that agile mentality of change, iterative improvement, as opposed to let me take that order and figure it out and drop it on somebody's lap later.
Yeah, and Christopher, how are you formalizing that process, capturing the feedback from the users, and then actually baking that into the process, as opposed to doing it on a sort of a more ad hoc? You know, what metrics and measurement processes are you using to capture that feedback?
You know, that's an interesting question, and one that we are asking ourselves. We're early in our process. We're a small shop. In fact, we've doubled in size as an IT organization in the last 6 months. So in and of itself, agile means they're bringing their experiences from other places. And now we're at that point where we're ready. So you need to start looking at burn rates. Make sure that you understand your capacity. And as we get those measurements, then we can start talking about return on investment. Going back to that example of agile where you're talking about the skateboard, did I get enough value to justify the spend? Yep. Now let's go to the scooter. Did I get enough value? And really, it's helping both IT and the rest of the business understand that it's a conversation about value, not about cost. that we really need to be talking about, and that is what's going to be successful. But we're so early in our conversation in this I guess it's a transformation, but I wouldn't think of it as a digital transformation. It's a transformation of culture and people. The digital transformation comes as you do things and think about it. But a lot of times you're doing digitization, not digital transformation. Your business is the same, you're just making it easier to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And sorry,
I was
Christopher.
going to
Yeah.
say, from a metric standpoint, it's about measuring value, return on investment, one. Two, how fast are you moving? Are you delivering change on a regular, consistent basis? And can you show that, not just in hours spent, but in business value? So that's the part that we're working on right now is what's the business case? Did they get the business value? And as a return on that business value, can we build on that? Or did we get enough and we can move on to the next thing? That's how we're approaching it.
Yeah, and I guess in IT, you're probably more familiar with those concepts of agile and iterative development, etc. How are you collaborating with other parts of the business, whether that be HR or sales and marketing or the web and e-commerce
Without
teams?
using those words. You explain it more in defining a role. So what we say is, up until now, you keep bringing us a list of things. Now what we want to do is we want you to work as part of our team. And so it becomes less about using the language, and it's more about helping them understand their role. And when they understand that they're part of the team, that they're accountable as well, and we're going to bring them in as maybe a process or a product owner. I like the concept of productization and treating what they have as a product. In fact, it resonates well with the rest of your organization. So part of it is changing the language to say, the POS is a product, and you are helping us define how that product is defined, what the capabilities of it are, what the value is. Can we get return on it? And when we start to use that language, they can conceptualize product ownership, and then we have them come into the process. And that's what we're doing literally right now, is helping define product owners for our first product set and getting them to align to it across the organization. And I'm having conversations all the way from the CEO through our sales operations teams to help them buy into that idea, commit to a resource that is going to have as part of their job description, I now own this product. And it's changing that mentality and that mindset that's really helping.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Christopher. One final question from me, and then we'll maybe go to some questions from the audience. But how are you extending that concept out to include the customers as well? We've spoken quite a lot about getting that buy-in and bringing people with you on that internal journey. How are you extending it out to include the customers and bringing them into that improvement journey?
So part of it is that we put our employees in the store and in the warehouse so that they experience it. Even in our warehouses, we see the customer coming in and picking up and so forth. So part of it is putting our team there. Another part is partnering with marketing. One of the big things that we're a fashion industry, and most people don't think of tile as being a fashion industry, but tile changes constantly, and you want it to look cool, and you want it to be, it changes not quite as fast as fast fashion with respect to clothing, but we change several times a year where we have new looks, new feels, and so a lot of it is understanding what's in that market. And we're starting to do a lot with what we call user-generated content and engaging at a social level to hear what our customers are saying or looking for. And we haven't yet formalized that. It's certainly an opportunity for us at the Tile Shop to formalize that even more. But we do have that user-generated content and the opportunity to hear requests, and then those get fed back into our product search and product development cycle. So that's one way that we're doing it, in addition to the experience that we see from a customer. And then we also have, the traditional ways of getting feedback from customers on our website, or we have a visualization tool on our website that allows people to see what tile looks like in a particular room and can change that around and make it visually pleasing to them, and then say, this is the tile I want and this is what I'd like you to, show me. But those are things that are fairly new, and so we're still learning how to incorporate all of those into not just our development process and our marketing processes, but also into our technology.
Take care. Fascinating stuff. Lovely to hear from you.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.